Welcome to Hoko Palizzo's The Writing Life. I am Joseph Ross, and our guest today is poet Marilyn Chin. It's a delight to be with you today.
Oh, thank you.
Marilyn. Marilyn's the author of 4 books of poetry and 1 book of fiction, and we're looking forward to a new and selected collection coming out in October of 2018 titled A Portrait of the Self as a Nation, which is a beautiful title.
Thank you.
It's been a delight these last few weeks to dive into Marilyn's books, to read and think about things to ask her. So I have, of course, a million more questions than we're going to get time for. But I'm very struck with your poem, Beijing Spring, and what it might be trying to do in the world. So I was hoping we could start with you reading that.
For sure.
And some questions.
Beijing Spring. Love, if I could give you the eternal summer sun, or China back her early ideological splendor, I would. If I could hoist the dead horse's back and retrieve the wisdom charred by the pyres of Chin. If I could give mother the Hong Kong of her mulberry youth, and father the answers that the ox desired, they would still be together now and not blame their sadness on the unyieldy earth. If I had separated goose from gander, the question of monogamy and breeding for life, the question of the pure yellow seed would not enter. This courtyard, this fortress, this alluvium where the dead leave their faces, each step I take erases the remnants of another. Each song I sing obfuscates the song of Chang'an. Ripples, washing, sand, ripples, washing, sand. Each poem I write conjures the dead, washing women of Loyang. Lover, on Tiananmen Square, near the Avenue of Eternal Peace, I believe in the passions of youth. I believe in eternal spring, as the white blossoms, sweet harbingers, pull a wreath around the city, as heaven spreads its blue indifference over the bloodied quay. I want to hold you against the soft silhouettes of my people. I want to place my mouth over your mouth. I want to breathe life into your life. Let me summon the paired connubial geese from the far reaches of the galaxy to soar over the red spokes of the sun's slow chariot and begin again.
Thank you, Marilyn. I love that poem. I hear in that the speaker of the poem speaking directly to that young man on Tiananmen Square, holding his hand bravely. I wrote it
for that young man. I wrote it for the Chinese Democratic Movement. But when I taught in Beijing a few years ago, my students knew nothing about that incident. It's not in their history books.
Amazing.
So maybe it's different now. Yeah. One can't tell. But the thing is, this poem is personal, is political, and is universal. I think this wanting for a Beijing spring, for an American spring, for the youth to come to voice their concerns. I love this moment where right now the youth are speaking out.
Yes.
They want to be heard. It's an important moment.
Yes, I agree with you. And talk to us about what role can poetry play in that?
I don't know. As W.H. Auden says, poetry makes nothing happen. So, but I've always, we love poetry. Those of us who love poetry know that it is a genre that is closest to our hearts. And as Audre Lorde says, poetry is not a luxury. It is important. And however, it's a vessel from which we speak, but perhaps one could speak, on the internet. One could blog. One could write fiction, write memoir. Write tweet.
Or tape a TV show about poetry.
Tape a TV show. But I think it's very important to speak, and why not use poetry? I think we're ambassadors for these forms, this genre.
Yeah, it seems like poetry can speak to the gut or the heart.
You're right.
In ways that other things might go. A good essay might go to the head, but maybe poetry gets in by the side door.
Yes, but poets are also very smart.
Yes, I don't mean to suggest. Yeah.
It's very hard to distill all these grand ideas into a haiku, into a little poem. I mean, it takes facility, it takes brilliance, it takes verb, right? So it takes courage.
Yes.
It takes courage to be a poet.
It does.
Yes, more courage to be a poet than to be an accountant.
I agree with you.
Or a president.
dealing with numbers. Anybody could do this, right? And there's some fearlessness in that poem, and in lots of your poems, in some different ways. Let me ask you about. I think we have a common love of the elegy.
Oh yes, the last book, Hard Love Province. There are quite a few elegies in there. Because for the last 15 years, I lost 2 boyfriends, my mother, my grandmother, and several close friends. Therefore, I couldn't help but write
what else
elegies.
could you do? Yeah.
I had to mourn in this book. But however, there's a scatological poem in there, and there are jokes and so forth, because I couldn't be sad for the entire book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and there are bad girl haiku. There's just lots of other stuff in the book. But I had to express my sadness. It's and the poetry, the self represents something very larger than the self. I learned this from the second wave feminists, like Adrienne Rich, who personal is political, and therefore the personal grieving extends to universal grieving and to a larger political and social context. I hope.
And one of the things I love about your poems, especially in Hard Love Province, is that while there are details about the particular losses you experienced, there's somehow room in the poem for me to find some place in there. Imagining mourning the loss of a lover. I can get the details of yours with Dawn Lone Wolf, and I'm going to ask you to read that poem in a minute. But there's also room in there for me for that can evoke my own, which I think is really a masterful thing, so that I'm not just, it isn't like it's a textbook on Marilyn Chin.
Right, yes.
It's a door or something. I'm not sure quite what the right image is, but and there's some fearlessness in that too, with your putting your grief out there and leaving room for us to find some of our own songs in there too.
Right, yeah. Shall I read it? Yeah, okay.
Please read that one. So this is Beautiful Boyfriend. This is a poem that, boy, the first time I read it, it's one of those where you sort of turn the book over when you're finished, and you just think, my goodness.
Beautiful Boyfriend. It's for Don Lone Wolf Romero, who died in 2011, and he died of an aneurysm. So there's a word stroke in there that's it's a pun that comes later. Beautiful Boyfriend. My skiff is made of spicewood, my oars are cassia bracked. Music flows from bow to starboard, early Mozart, cool side of Coltrane, and miles of miles. Cheap California Merlot and my new boyfriend. My beautiful boyfriend, please shave your head. At the Miramar barber shop, take the tonsure. Bow toward the earth, prostrate and praise. breathe in the goddess's potent citron. Bullet, don't shoot him, he's my draft horse. Night scope, don't pierce him, he's my love stock. Sniper, who are you, high on the roof? Stop for a slow cigarette, let him escape. If I could master the 9 doors of my body and close my heart to the cries of suffering, perhaps I could love you like no other, float my mind toward the other side of hate. The shanty towns of Tijuana sing for you. The slums of Little Sudan hold evening prayer. One dead brown boy is a tragedy. 10,000 is a statistic. So let's my love until the dogs pass. All beautiful boyfriends are transitory. They have no souls. They're shiny brown flesh. Tomorrow they'll turn into purple festering corpses, fissured, gored by myriad flies. My beautiful boyfriend drives up in his late Humvee, says we're going to hunt Bin Laden. We'll sleep in caves and roast wild hare and rise to praise the bright red sun. I was once a beloved spotted ox. Now I've become a war horse of hate. I pull the lorries of 10,000 corpses before I myself was finally flayed. Down the Irrawaddy River, you lay yourself to sleep. No sun, no moon, no coming, no going, no causality, no personality, no hunger, no thirst. Malarial deltas, typhoidal keys. Tsunamis don't judge. Calamity grieves no one. The poor will be submerged. The rich won't be saved. Purge the innocent. Sink the depraved. You push down my hand with your bony hand. The fox hair brush lifts and bends. There's no revision in this life, you sigh. One bad stroke and all is gone. What do I smell but the perfume of transience, crushed calyxes, rotting phloem? Let's write pretty poems, pretty poems, pretty poems. Mass sterile pogroms with a sweet whiff of oblivion.
That is a beautiful poem. Yeah, and he's honored in that poem. Yeah. And there's some fearlessness in there too, imagining the sort of the decomposition of our mortality. It's what happens. You're just honest. You're just facing it.
Yes, like it's what Buddha says. What do we have to look forward to? Sickness, suffering, and death. You know, that's what we have. And it's important to live the here and now.
So
to live now.
So
yes.
live this moment.
Now live this moment.
It's the
yeah.
one we've got. Yeah, yeah.
And
well, I love that poem. Yeah, thank you. Your work also includes a lot about the human body. You love the body, or it sounds like you love the body.
Oh yes, as Audre Lorde says, you know, we have erotic power. We have to write with our erotic power.
Yeah.
And as Helene Susu says, we have to write with our bodily juices. She says you have to look at you have to really I really believe in writing with the body, in writing with my womanly juices, and I don't know what that means, but it just adds another layer to the work. I mean, I think a lot of academics we walk around, you know, thinking all day, and we forget that we're embodied, you know, and for me the poem must be flesh and spirit.
Yes.
You know, flesh and mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting because I teach American literature, and we begin with some of the Puritan poems, you know, which are not going to deal with the body, and we've come a long way, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think your poems deal with a much more entire or complete human person than this other thing that's just been shut off or you know, swept away, when of course we know there really is no sweeping it away. You just might not be writing about it, but I'm glad you are. Yeah.
Well, Emily Dickinson's, I feel a funeral in my brain. I mean, pounding. I mean, she writes with the body, but it's interesting how it is very important for some of us, and especially women poets, to write with our bodily juices, to perform that body. Yeah.
Now we'll connect to the body again in a second, but let me ask you this. You have a whole series of haiku in Hard Love Province, and you've talked about how that you're doing something revolutionary with that ancient form. Tell us a little bit about that, and then maybe read a few of those.
Well, the whole thing about haiku, how haiku has become what has, it's become somewhat, it's become a pop form, right? Because everybody teaches the haiku.
So 575.
575, and high school students write haiku, and Hallmark greeting card has haiku, and so, but somehow, I learned from actor Etheridge Knight and Sonia Sanchez. Etheridge Knight wrote a haiku in prison, and Sonia Sanchez merged the haiku form with the blues form. So it is really the African Americans who took this somewhat formulaic, it turned saccharine, turned into a saccharine form in English.
Yeah.
They turned it into political form and they gave it a new social, historic, political context. And so I thought that was very interesting. They and also, I'm always talking back to history and to the patriarchy. And so what Basho, the Edo period poets, Basho, Issa, Busan, those guys traveled around and wrote haiku and I don't know, they did, and drank tea and sake, right? And I know they had some prostitutes on the side, but in any case,
the body was always there. The body was always there.
But they would not. I mean, they would not let women, write haiku. I mean, in that period, you would not be able to find one, woman poet. I mean, haiku poet. So. Therefore, I talk back to history. I talk back to Basho by subverting and even perverting his ideas. And for instance, let me read the first haiku. 100 red fire ants scouring the white peony. Now, why is that erotic? It is. The peony is one of the winter flowers, is it not? I mean, but it is the fact that I am imbuing it with this womanist, feminist gaze, in that that I am bringing this, sort of my bodily, my womanist bodily juices into the form. Fallen plum blossoms return to the branch. You sleep, then harden again. Well, that is X-rated. Okay, I don't know if we're going to cut this or not, but that's the thing is the haiku. Suddenly the plum blossoms, these archetypical haiku moments are subverted, and so we're having a woman's gaze, and the woman is looking at the man. I mean, so it's become, this is an erotic series, and I had great fun with it. Yeah. You
can tell there's a playfulness there as well. That's great for the reader.
And the famous one with the ancient pond, the famous Basho poem. Ancient pond, the frog jumps in, and that's his famous poem. In that you're supposed to, be in this Zen moment in which all is quiet and zenful, and then all you hear is the frog, and that is, supposed to be the perfect haiku moment, and this is supposed to be the perfect haiku. But I write ancient Prague. The frog jumps in and in and in. The deep slap of water. Basically, it is a reconfiguration of that important haiku, basho haiku. Mm-hmm. But it is also subverted. I mean, it's also perverted into. I mean, it's also sexual. So, mm-hmm. So I turned the poem of the spirit, of the haiku of the spirit and of the mind, into a poem about the body. Mm-hmm. And so that that is, that gesture is it's subversive.
Yeah.
And I've had. There's some purists who really hate the poem, hate this series, and then but of course, a true Zen poet would love the poem because, in Zen, you could critique Buddha, you can critique Basho. It's all, it's all fair game. Mm-hmm. It's all game. So.
Well, it makes me think about another ancient form when Shakespeare writes the sonnets. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun.
Yes,
so
right.
he's sticking his finger in the eye of Petrarch,
yeah,
who
right.
wrote all these romantic sonnets that we would think are sort of saccharine or cheesy, yeah. we might say today. So you and Shakespeare are on the same seat.
Oh, of course, I love cheesy love poems. I love cheesy, yeah. Cheesiness is great.
I love the way you twist them.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
And I think a lot of your readers do too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what are you reading these days, or what poets do you read?
Oh my gosh, I read everybody and everything. It's just, it's. What am I reading? I always have a Tang Dynasty, poets book on at my bedside and a big dictionary. I mean, we talked about why I call myself, why it's okay to call myself a Chinese American poet, in that I try to read poetry from both sides of my literary heritage. And so I try to keep that Chinese poetry in my blood, in my ear, in my voice at all times. Mm-hmm. And simultaneously, I read all. Right now I'm rereading the modernists. Mm-hmm. So as I'm reading the Blackbird poem, I reread the 13 Ways of Looking at the Blackbird, and I'm reading. I read everybody, and that's important. It's mm-hmm. important because I think if you're going to be a poet, you might as well be a poet. You might as well know all the as many forms as possible. So if through my work I have sonnets, I have haiku, I have Chinese quatrains. I call Chinese American quatrains. I make my own forms. I make hybrid forms. I wrote a bunch of blues poems. I wrote jazzy kind of improvisational poems, and I've written poems in bad Chinese, and I translate them into English. I mean, I read poems in French, Spanish, and I'm in a little German. What I do is I use a dictionary. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very important to be able to read poetry from a second language. Mm-hmm. And the other day I was rereading Catullus, and I used the I have this Latin, old dog-eared Latin dictionary. He's a nasty dude, mm-hmm. Catullus, and I love the invective. I'm learning how to, he's, and so we're poets because we love poetry, and I think that's, and that's why we're in this business, because
sure.
we love reading it, we love writing it, right?
Yeah, it sounds like you have, there's a deep love of words there underneath all of it, yeah. You said we're anticipating a new and selected book from you. What's that process like of choosing poems?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I was it's really 30 years of work, and my first book, Dwarf Bamboo, is out of print, and the reason why I had this idea to do this is that one student kept emailing me about particular poems because he had to write this essay for his class, and he was taking poems from the internet. And I said, why don't you buy a book for you keep bothering?
Right.
And he said, well, if you bring out a best hits album, maybe I'll buy it.
Greatest hits. Marilyn Chin's greatest hits.
I said, oh, you're absolutely right. Maybe I should do that. And then China last year brought out a translation of a selected, a small selected, and of course they selected the poems. I mean, there's there aren't like raucous political poems in there, but.
No Beijing spring.
No, yeah. But in any case, I thought it was time. I guess if you have a new and selected, that means you're old. But I have good hair dye. But
it just means you have enough great hits to make a greatest hits.
But in any case, I tried to put in student favorites and also some experimental pieces and pieces that scholars have written about so I tried. It's so difficult to choose amongst your children, right? And I don't know if I did the best job, but I think it's time. It's time to bring out something that this kid could go and buy. He wanted a best hits album. I don't.
Right. Marilyn, it's been a delight to dive into your poems over these last few weeks for me, and it's been a delight to read with you today and talk with you today. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Hoko Pulitzo's The Writing Life.